All right, everyone. Trump is now talking about the possibility of laying waste to the Ninth Circuit because it's continuing to stand in his way. It's basically the Obama judiciary leftover, far left. It's what you're talking about with that region of the country with the Ninth Circuit. They've been continuously standing in the way of proposals he has made that are legal, that are constitutional, and that federal judges, technically speaking, do not have the power to indefinitely stop from happening. The problem is if a federal judge says, no, this can't happen, you would need the Supreme Court. An executive can't just say to the federal judge, well, to hell with you, I'm not going to listen to this. Even if they are operating outside of the bounds of their legal judicial power, the only way to actually stop them from doing that is by using the Supreme Court. That takes time, and that's the main problem with his proposal to, for instance, temporarily stop refugees and push the wall and so forth. Most of the immigration side of Trump's platform cannot be fulfilled while the Ninth Circuit is stacked with people that are essentially beyond neoliberal when it comes to social issues. They would almost be closer to like Warrenite semi-progressives or something like that on these issues. They're also virulently anti-gun, among other things. And they're pro-censorship, but then again, that's any judiciary body that tends to exist. Republican-friendly, Democrat-friendly. They're all basically same shit, different asshole when it comes to that. The problem I can see with Trump attempting to do this is that you get short-term gain but very long-term pain. By setting a behavioral precedent for simply wiping out any segment of the judiciary other than the Supreme Court, which a president can't do anything about, that stands in the way of anything, what it can lead to is a future where federal courts simply, if a government, for instance, let's say a Republican or a Democratic president wanted to do something that was abusive to the population, they could, in preparation for that, they wipe out the federal courts, any opposition there. And then there's not necessarily anybody who can take the case all the way to the Supreme Court to even get it addressed in the first place, because it would be a stopgap between it ever getting there. The federal court might say, no, we're not going to hear the case, sends it back down to the lower court, never gets heard at the Supreme Court, thus nobody can do anything about executive activism. This would be an extremely dangerous step. Now, short term, it may allow him to deport the people he feels he needs to deport and that most of his fans want him to deport, honestly, to get his wall, to get the immigration freeze. My question would be, is that worth having wild pendulum swings within the federal court system from here on out for the rest of time in this country, which drives an even further wedge into our government? We've got enough problems, I think, now with judicial activism in the Supreme Court and in lower courts without having this happen. I would say, I would warn Trump not to do this. I would say it should be a more limited action. Something obviously needs to be done. Get the Supreme Court involved. If you're willing to be patient, take it to the Supreme Court. They're going to probably come down on your side, and that will be the end of it. The federal courts the federal courts there will be muzzled. They won't be able to stop you because the Supreme Court outranks them. And that's really what he has to do. He has to wait, take the issue to the Supreme Court. He has to say, okay, here's the proposal. Federal court steps in, blocks the proposal, acts beyond its bounds. Technically speaking, doesn't even have the power to permanently block what a president would want to do. That's left to the Supreme Court. He then brings it to the Supreme Court, says, well, the federal court is clearly wrong. This is legal for me to do as the president, and or it's legal for the legislature to pass and for me to sign, and the Supreme Court weighs in. Now, with Gorsuch there, with a relatively balanced court, I think he could get those proposals passed through. Because I can't imagine any specific constitutional argument that gives the states the right individually to determine exterior immigration. The Commerce Clause alone is going to stop them from being able to successfully make that argument. As far as state-to-state travel, yeah, it's free, it's open, the states can put very few regulations. The federal government, additionally, is very, very limited with regards to internal immigration. With regards to external immigration, the question would boil down to, does a state have the right to take in a limitless number of refugees and to prevent the federal government or other states from stopping them from doing so? Does the state essentially have the right to determine immigration policy, or is it federal supremacy in that case? Now, I personally prefer states' rights over federal rights, generally speaking. But with regards to other states, it's fairly clear that diplomacy, interactions with other foreign states, is primarily a federal job. It's one of the few things that is most certainly a federal power, as opposed to something provided to the states under the 10th Amendment, specifically regards to the exchange of goods across state lines and so forth. Now, I think the federal government should step back and largely not weigh in on such things. But on this one, yeah, it makes sense. Because otherwise what you would have is, let's say the people of one state, let's say the people of Texas don't want any more immigrants. And they say, well, under the, if this is decided in favor of the states, they say, well, we're not going to take any immigrants in this state. We're not going to allow them here. There will be no sanctuary cities. We will personally deport anyone that we want, anytime that we want, who's not here as a citizen. And they would gain that right. But a neighboring state could say, oh, the immigrants can come here, though, immediately rubber stamp their residency in that state, put pressure on the federal government, turn them into citizens, and export them to that state that didn't want immigrants there. It would set up a massive constitutional crisis. It could lead to civil war. So I don't think that if the Supreme Court gets the case that they would come down on the side of these federal courts that are issuing these injunctions, nor the states that want to shelter people who are in this country illegally. They're not legally here. They did not go through the proper federal process of getting into the country. I believe in immigration reform, but to completely ignore the laws that we have in place, even if they are convoluted, is arguably far worse than the sort of abuses that you get through mass deportation or something like that. I think it's worse. The Supreme Court would probably come down on Trump's side. He would get his way, but he has to be patient. If he starts cracking apart federal courts and stripping them of their power and replacing these judges just to get his way short term, long term he's going to feel the pain. Because when he is gone, when he's no longer the president, let's say a far-left Democrat takes office and decides, okay, states no longer have the right to tell the federal government that they won't host large groups of immigrants. We can take 100 million immigrants. None of the states have any say. The populations don't have any say. We're going to force the states to pay for housing for these people, and nobody would be able to do a damn thing for it. So I think long-term it would be much more dangerous for Trump to go down that quick and easy path than to sit back and be patient. I think patience in this case is definitely a virtue, even if I generally agree with his side of the prospect and not with the states and the federal courts that are attempting to stand in his way. That's about all. Peace out.